Lord of the Rings Online is one of the greatest MMORPGs I've ever played, with one of the best adaptations of Middle-earth that has ever been put to a video game. Alongside great storytelling and beautiful music, this game is absolutely wonderful, or should I say has been absolutely wonderful, because some things have come to light that are making the wonderful land of Middle-earth look like it's in a bit of a pickle. And today, we're going to talk about just that. Hello everyone, my name is Brightlight, this is my fancy shirt, and today I want to walk into the wonderful world of Middle-earth once again. In fact, let's change the scenery, shall we? Because today we are diving into the first of a two-part video series on the current state of Lord of the Rings Online here at the end of 2023. There have been some big reveals and news happenings that we have to talk through, as well as some reasons that I think that this game is not in the best place that it could be. Despite the fact that the Corsairs of Umbar expansion is coming out very soon, in the first part of this two-part series, I'm going to walk through why I believe that LOTRO is in quite a bit of trouble as a game here at the end of 2023. And then in part 2 coming out soon, we're going to be talking about the thing that I think is the big fix that could change the scope of Lord of the Rings Online. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Now, to really understand the trouble that Lord of the Rings Online is currently in right now, we have to go back to the announcement of LOTRO Remastered. EG7, which is the parent company of Standing Stone Games, the producers of Lord of the Rings Online, came out with a statement promising 3 major overhauls to the game. The first one was a graphical overhaul. This game obviously looks very old, and I think in comparison to all of the other things that they promised, this is probably the one that was lowest of an excitement on my list, but still a graphical refresh to make the game look a little bit better, play a little bit better, and in reality, compete on the main MMO stage, especially with the top 5 MMOs out there. The second thing that I thought was going to be very exciting was a console port of LOTRO. Most of the people that will watch this video are PC gamers, and I myself am a PC gamer. I don't own a console, but I can't help but recognize just how important console gaming is to the MMO landscape. As soon as you add console gaming, your MMO instantly pops up in credibility and player count because there's just a lot more people that are willing to download a free MMORPG and then play and then buy through the Xbox or PlayStation game system areas. Games like Final Fantasy XIV and Elder Scrolls Online both really do benefit from being on console, even though of course the primary bulk of their users are likely on PC. Having a console port is a really great way to up the population. And of course with Lord of the Rings Online, population is an issue. Being able to find groups and find people to play with, especially in the middling ranges of the levels maybe 30 through maybe 120, it's hard to find people, and having a console port would have really helped with this one. And lastly, and really most importantly when it comes to LOTRO Remastered, was going to be a performance overhaul. It's no secret that lag is a really big deal in LOTRO. In fact, it's one of the things that keeps players away or unable to really dive all the way in, and performance overhaul in this game would have been a hugely welcome benefit, especially for those that live in the EU, those that live in Asia, and want to be able to play a caster class, for instance. It's really nearly impossible to do in the current state of the game. This obviously would have likely looked like a new engine for the game, or at least upgrading the game to work on a new and better engine, cleaning up the code, things like that. Now, obviously, all 3 of these things are sorely needed, and I think that the player count alone is enough to showcase why. See, the world of Lord of the Rings Online has boasted hundreds of thousands of players who have been passionate about Lord of the Rings, MMOs, or both at the same time. A refresh of this wonderful game would have the potential to bring back tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of players to this game, really adding into the community of what is an amazing experience. And I can't tell you just how excited I am to really have this refresh come into being.
We said, hey, let's go remaster Lord of the Rings. Sounded really great. And we went through the numbers. When we did that, we got to spend like $30 million. So for us, it's not the right use of capital, hence the reason why we're staying away from things like that.
They ask you how you are, and you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
That's right, EG7 came out recently and canceled the Lord of the Rings Online remake. It's a bit of bad news for Lord of the Rings Online, as one media outlet reports. Remember last year when EG7 began talking about a remaster of Lord of the Rings Online? That's not happening now. In fact, one of the EG7 executives uses it as an example of poor return on risk. He tells investors that it would have cost the company something like $30 million, and for that, it could have built a brand new game. So don't expect that to happen for LOTRO or any other title in EG7's portfolio. Now, this is obviously for me kind of devastating, because what this showcases to me is that EG7 is not really willing to put in the money and the investment to really make this game more than it currently is. Unfortunately, how this looks, it seems as if EG7 has said this game is kind of in what we might call life support mode, where the game will continue to run and they'll continue to pay staff to help develop minor things, but major developments of this game really are not going to be a part of its future. And this is a real bummer, because over the last couple of years, the player count, although it's had some decent spikes, has been declining steadily, even through new expansions. Now, there is a new expansion coming out soon, Corsairs of Umbar. I'm going to be playing that. I'm excited to review it, but at the end of the day, new expansions have proven not to actually boost player count. It's just kind of brought the same old people back who then play it and then scurry off to another game. And with this kind of a cycle, we're not really, in my opinion, going to see LOTRO really become all that it needs to be to compete in the top 5 space. Now, I don't say this to slight any developers of this game or anybody currently engaged in the community. I currently play Lord of the Rings Online. I really like this game. And regardless of where the game goes from here, I have had some absolutely incredible memories in this game. This was my first MMORPG outside of the web-based MMOs that were out there back in 2008 for me. And I absolutely adore the memories that I have. I can remember the first time walking into Bree, leveling my hunter, going into the scary parts of Angmar at that time, and then even going into the Rift raid and enjoying that incredible raid that still to me stands up as one of the greatest raids in any MMO out there. But the reality is, when this game goes on life support, you will just see a slow bleed of players. Now, the question that we have to ask is, if EG7 was coming out and of course promising this massive remaster, well, what the heck happened? Well, Amazon happened, of course. Amazon did announce a new Lord of the Rings MMO. Another press outlet says this: the world of Middle-earth continues to prove an endlessly fertile ground for creators, and Amazon Games has a passion for building immersive, compelling worlds and publishing games for a global audience. We have a clear ambition to create the highest quality entertainment products for this IP, whether we utilize internal resources or team up with the best industry partners that complement our capabilities. We're taking every care to deliver an MMO which will do justice to the expansive Middle-earth universe and delight players around the world. What this means is that Embracer Group, who has gotten the rights to produce video games around the Lord of the Rings franchise, and Amazon have teamed up to create what will become a new MMO. This is not the same Lord of the Rings MMO that was announced maybe 2 or 3 years ago, where Amazon was going to team up with Tencent, the Chinese gaming company. That one was canceled, but when Embracer Group got the rights, Amazon announces that that project is back in action. Now, if we were to put LOTRO just maybe to the side for a moment, I think I am cautiously optimistic about what Amazon is producing. I'm going to be following it. I'll be making videos on it, so be sure to subscribe to the video. But as an MMO fan, I'm cautiously optimistic because of my recent time in New World. I've got another video coming out on the excitement that I have around this, but there's a real positive to Amazon creating this MMO around Lord of the Rings, and of course there's one really big negative as well. The big positive is that New World, now being 2 years old, is really a completely different game from the way that it launched. It didn't launch very well. It launched really poorly. There were maps that were literally copy and pasted and then turned 90 degrees to create another zone. It was not very good. There were no mounts. The story did not exist. There was no voice acting. It was just a really, really bad space. Well, now playing in 2023 with New World's most recent release, they now have a fully fleshed out mount system. They have fully voice acted main story quests all the way through to the top level, and then the voice acting is actually quite good. The world is still as immersive as ever, and I'm not gonna lie, to be only 2 years old and to look as good and play as good as New World does makes me very excited that the Amazon development team has learned enough about MMO creation to really be able to create and prove a very powerful MMO. In fact, even when the game first came out with just the immersion of the sound and the way the world looked, my initial thought was, man, I wish there was a Lord of the Rings MMO MMO that looked and played like this, because this is really beautiful and I'd love to spend a lot more time here. Now, the negative side of Amazon creating a Lord of the Rings MMO is it really stems from Rings of Power for me. And I know we can go this way and that way, but at the end of the day, I think that Amazon, especially as a TV studio, didn't really respect the work of Tolkien very much. There was a lot of 2020s inserted into the Lord of the Rings universe, which is not what it's all about. There are mountains of videos on this, of course. That's just the way that I feel on it. But I do worry that they're not going to reflect and respect the IP of Lord of the Rings quite as well as SSG has in the past. You can say a lot of things about LOTRO, but the way that they respect the IP is incredible, and that's where the magic of Lord of the Rings Online is. So I am excited, I'm cautiously optimistic, but let's go back to LOTRO, because if the question is, why did they cancel their upcoming remaster? Well, it's because there's a Goliath coming in Amazon, and I just don't think that they're ready to take on this massive company. If Amazon is Goliath, SSG and Lord of the Rings are a very, very tiny ant, especially if they're not willing to spend anywhere close to $30 million, and if that seems like a massive investment. Obviously, it's a very, very small thing compared to what Amazon is going to be putting out. So from a business perspective, it kind of does make sense. But unfortunately, what that means for Lord of the Rings Online is it's just going to stay the way that it is. They'll release some more expansions and more expansions, which, side note, are extremely expensive, by the way. If you've looked at the Corsairs of Umbar expansion, it's a very expensive expansion, especially crossing the $100 mark when you get to the Ultimate Fan Bundle. It's a lot of money. Anyway, I'm poor, but that's just how I feel.
Help me, I'm poor.
But at the end of the day, it seems like they're just going to kind of milk the current player base and provide the world until, of course, Amazon's MMO comes out, and a lot of that player base will likely migrate over at least to check out that new MMO. So where does this leave Lord of the Rings Online? I know it's a bit of a downer, but LOTRO is definitely in trouble, and unless they do something big, I think they're going to stay in the same spot. It doesn't look like another few expansions are really going to alleviate their troubles. The encroaching storm of Amazon's MMO makes it more and more likely that the game will simply live on in life support and won't really ever challenge the top 5 MMOs for the big majority of MMO players out there. And that is a bummer, because I love this game. But alternatively, maybe cracking into the top 5 and becoming a massive MMO again really isn't the goal for Lord of the Rings Online anyway. And that's okay. You don't always have to be pressing for first place to be a phenomenal game. So many indie releases out there showcase this, that even though they're not pressing to be the biggest game on the market, they can still create something that is full of passion and full of heart and full of life. I believe that regardless of what happens moving forward, Lord of the Rings Online is going to go down as one of the greats in MMOverse regardless, up there with names like EverQuest and RuneScape, where even though there's a smaller contingent of players left over in some of those games, it's still an amazing experience that I feel privileged to have been a part of. Maybe like Frodo at the end of Return of the King, Lord of the Rings Online will be able to look back with a smile and sail into the undying West. And the legacy of hours of fun, friendship, and immersion into the world of Middle-earth will be a beautiful thing to have developed, published, and played for every single person involved. From the beginning with Turbine to now Standing Stone Games, I would personally as a player offer my thanks to the developers who have really created something that I think that they can be proud of for the rest of their life. They've given so many people an escape into the Middle-earth that Tolkien created, not just their interpretation of it, but a real faithful adaptation and recreation of Lord of the Rings Online. And I think for that, they have something to be extremely proud of. Because sometimes throwing in the towel is one of the ways that you actually experience success. Being able to say, I'm done and I've done a good job and I'm going to pass it off to the next thing is success in itself. And I think that if you're a part of the Standing Stone team, you've got a lot to be proud of. But let's wind that back just a moment and let's just pretend that EG7 wanted to take on Goliath, but not spend $30 million in the process. Let's pretend that Standing Stone Games doesn't want to go quietly into the Undying Lands, but like Amazon's Galadriel, wants to perform the impossible task of swimming back hundreds of miles to Middle-earth. That would have never happened. I'm still bitter, but that's not the subject of this video. If looking forward to ever more expensive expansions isn't the slow death that the LOTRO developers want or think it deserves, what can Lord of the Rings Online do to create something new? Well, from my perspective, it's not necessarily time to look forward to new content, but it's time to look back to the glory days to introduce a revolutionary new system that will bring tens, if not hundreds of thousands of nostalgic players back to the world of Middle-earth and Lord of the Rings Online without having to spend $30 million to do it. And that, my friends, is what we're going to talk about in part 2 of this video. So be sure to stay tuned to the channel, like the video so that you get the update for the newest one coming out, subscribe, hit the bell icon, all that wonderful stuff that feeds the algorithm gods. Friends, as always, I want to say thank you so much for watching to the end of this video and putting up with my voice. You are absolutely incredible. But regardless, what I say at the end of every single video that's more important than any content in the video is this. It's that you're more loved than you know, and you are so much more valuable than you realize. I hope you have an incredible day, and I will see you in the next one.